What's up, guys? This is Ian here, coach of your Ladner Lantern, bringing you guys another episode of the Draft Recap series on the NCL YouTube channel. This is the NCL Season 2 Draft Recap for the UNC Wingulls, coached by my good friend Jay, or the Johnson 3. Jay is a fantastic battler. I have battled him in a few leagues now. He's very consistent. He plays in some big leagues like the IPA and Red, and I know he's a really cool dude as well. Heading into this draft, Jay had the 11th overall pick, which meant he was really close to the wheel. I think it's a pretty decent pick, actually. And he decided that he didn't want to take the draft super seriously just because he plays in these big leagues like Red and IPA where he will take it seriously. So it's kind of a break for him, but he's supporting me, which is really cool. Big ups to Jay for filling into the 12th spot in the league. I think I was really happy to have him join us. I'd kind of been waiting for him to join since season 1. Unfortunately, he didn't want to in season 1, but I'm really glad that he's joining in season 2 because I know how good of a battler he is, and I know he can compete pretty hard this season. So, getting into things, again, he had the 11th overall pick, and I know he wasn't taking it super seriously, so he opted to choose a draft where he was drafting only Mons under base 100 speed. So, heading into round 1, there was a lot of good stuff going. A lot of the good stuff was gone. Things like Kyurem Black that I was imagining he was going to grab was gone already. A lot of those slow threats. Sand was still up in the air. Austin and I sort of talked about that in our draft speculation video about whether Jay would grab Sand because all of the Sand setters are under base 100. All of the Sand abusers are under base 100. I thought it was kind of a cool archetype that he could pick up and sort of just throw onto a team and do well with. But he actually ended up grabbing, I think, it wasn't the first fairy because Tapu Koko went, but it was the second fairy of the draft in Clefable, a mod that he is very familiar with. I've seen him draft Clefable. This is at least the 4th or 5th time that I've personally seen him draft Clefable. It seems to be very common. He seems to be a strength mon for him. All of those stats kind of seem pretty middling, but you have to realize that Clefable has the unaware ability, so it cannot be set up on, basically. If it is set up on, then unaware blocks the effects of the boosts. It's also a Magic Guard bond, so it's not going to get whittled down by Toxic or anything like that. It's got reasonable base HP at 95, reasonable base Spit F at base 90. It's an okay special attacker at base 95. Most of the time you'll see this with Moonblast. Sometimes you can see it as a Life Orb attacker. Magic Guard does block the Life Orb recoil, so it's pretty useful there. Pretty slow mon again, but that's sort of his whole team. Really good fairy. Starts off a Fairy Dragon Steel Core for him that I think is going to be pretty impressive, and actually for under base 100 at least, and gives him a really solid Wish Passer as well if he wanted to use it that way. It's a Cleric, so it's kind of cool. Coming around the wheel, he had a really early pick into round 2, and he actually grabbed Gothtail, a mon that went completely undrafted last season. This is allowed to be a Trapper. It's another specially defensive wall for the most part. Most of the time in Ubers, you see Gothtail with no attacks. You sort of just see it stall things to death. I'm really hoping that's not his strategy. I know he told me in DMs that this is more of a Trick Room strategy, which he's kind of forced into with the way that he was drafting. But his team does play well around Trick Room, and this is a Trick Room setter for him. It's kind of a neat competitive user as well, potentially if someone wants to defog away any hazards he has. Clefable is obviously a rock setter, so if anyone wants to defog away his rocks, he can get a +2 Gothtail in their face. Gothtail is honestly kind of underwhelming. Besides that, it's really slow, just like Clefable. It's a decent Frisk user to scout things out as well. I could see it doing a lot of work in the format. Typically, you don't see Gothtail that often, even in Ubers leagues, and especially when it's a tier 1. I think this is a really poor pick as a tier 1. I understand where Jay was going with it, but because I have it tiered in tier 1, because it's a Trapper, I just think that it's generally one of those mons that I was trying to keep away from people drafting at all. So we'll see how Jay can use this. Maybe I'll just ban trapping next season based on how he uses it and whatnot. In round 3, Jay ended up grabbing the best dragon in tier 3, which was formerly in tier 2 in Haxorus. This mon is an absolute monster. Because it's under base 100, it's close enough, but it is under base 100, so it fit his mold. Mold Breaker Haxorus can absolutely blow through some teams. Mons that have Levitate are not immune to its Earthquake, which means it can just plow through those. certain Mons have Sturdy, which it can blow through with Earthquake, things like that. Base 147 attack is ridiculous. You're never ever going to see this thing run as a special attacker because of that. It's got okay bulk. It's not really tanking a hit. You kind of have to run like Yachi Berry for most things. A lot of the times you'll see Z on Haxorus, and with our unlimited Z moves, basically, Haxorus is going to be a huge threat. I have lots of high hopes for Haxorus on this team. It's the second part of his Fairy Dragon Steel Core, and I think it is a valuable part of the team at the moment. In the next round, he ended up grabbing Porygon 2, a mon that I myself had my eye on. Quite the bulky boy with the Violite. Actually has a very good special attack stat, and you can combine that with 3 fantastic abilities, and it is working out well. Even though he's a Trick Room team, I'm not a huge fan of Porygon 2 being the same speed tier as his Clefable. Doubling up on speed tiers is not something that I'm super happy with normally. But because he's a slower team, Porygon 2 is probably going to be able to run Analytic quite often and be able to get off some really powerful Tri-Attacks, Ice Beams, Thunderbolt. That's kind of what you normally see on a P2 set. At the moment, he really has to watch out for Toxic, but luckily he has Clefable as a really good status absorber for that. That's a function that Clefable can fill very well. In the next round, Jay ended up picking up a mon of my own heart and of my runner-up team from last season in Rotom-Mow. In my mind, Rotom-Mow was a sleeper OP pick last season for me. It went 2-0 throughout the entire season, came to like 6 games or something like that. I think Rotom-Mow is a really strong pick. It's an extremely good electric sponge, which he didn't have, but it didn't really matter at the moment. We'll see that in his next pick that it really matters. It's a really good special attacker. It's a really good pivot option, which he was lacking previously. So you can pivot into something like Clefable to tank stuff, pivot into Porygon 2 to sponge stuff, pivot into Gothtail to trap stuff, those sorts of things. Extremely good defensive mon. Will-O-Wisp is a really good move, and Leaf Storm sort of hits things really, really hard. He doesn't necessarily have anything that he's going to have to hit Leaf Storm with at the moment, but he sort of struggles with bulky waters, so that could be something that he's looking for there. Next up, Jay decided to skip over round 4, which was the round of bulky waters, and ended up grabbing himself Jellicent in round 6. Pretty good low-tier bulky water, I would say. You pretty much have to prep for it. It's a water immunity for him, which is really cool. He doesn't have a water-weak team yet, if at all, but maybe he's building up to something along those lines later. Decent Curse Body user. It's a Trick Room setter. I forgot to mention Porygon 2 is also a Trick Room setter, so that's kind of cool. It can abuse the Trick Room. It's another base 60 speed, which I'm but you know, that's sort of the way his team is built. Pretty bulky mon, decent special attacker. It's going to get a lot of skull burns. It's kind of just going to live. The fact that it has its own recovery, just like Porygon 2 and Clefable, I think is really important. All 3 of those are extremely good sponges, and with their own recovery, they can sort of keep sponging hits basically forever. I know Jay is pretty well versed in using Jellicent as well, and so I know that he's going to be really comfortable in using this pick. In round 7, Jay actually finishes off his Fairy Dragon Steel Core. He does have a water and a grass now in the Rotom-Mow and the Jellicent, but his Fairy Dragon Steel consists of Clefable, Haxorus, and Bisharp. This also is a Dark type, which can help with the Gothtail being weak to Ghost. Porygon obviously could tank those too, but Gothtail and Jellicent were both weak to Ghost, so I think picking up a Dark type here was also very useful. I'm a big fan of Bisharp. I've never drafted it myself, but as a Defiant user, it sort of fills the same role as Gothtail competitive. He's got 1 Rock Setter so far, 2 with Bisharp. You don't really see Stealth Rocks on Bisharp all that much, but it can get them. If things want to defog away rocks, then Defiant is there, competitive is there. I think it's a really cool pick. Really good physical attacker, kind of going along with Haxorus. Both of them are really premier physical attackers. He doesn't have a fantastic special attacker yet, but he's got a lot of good special attackers that are decent at what they do at the very least. Bisharp is some priority for him as well, which sort of helps out. Before he only had things like Sucker Punch on Rotom-Mow, which is like a non-move. It's an unmove. Basically, no one runs that ever. Yeah, good Dark Stab, which is really cool. Knocking off items, I think, is going to be sort of a big idea for the Bisharp this season. And it's a good Fairy Killer to help out the Haxorus, which otherwise would have to run Poison Jab or Z Poison Jab or Iron Tail or Z Iron Tail. In the next round, Jay decided to grab Hitmonlee, good spinner, so he's got some more removal now. Rotom-Mow is some removal for him with the Defog. Not that his team's super weak to rocks. In fact, I don't think anything's weak to rock that he has so far. But Hitmonlee is a really strong fighting type. The Unburden ability makes it so that it can double its speed. It's actually underspeeds Excadrill in sand, even with that, which is pretty funny. Reckless High Jump Kick is really scary to switch into. Again, he's picking up some really strong fighting physical attackers. It's very weak on the defensive side, physically defensive side. 50 HP into 53 defense is not good whatsoever. It's actually bulkier than I thought on the special side. Not that 50 HP backs that up very well, but this completes his Psychic Dark Fighting Core, which is something that I sort of just talk about sometimes. I actually think it's a fairly important core to pick up because they sort of complement each other. Dark types can cover the Psychic types, fighting types can cover the Dark types, and Psychic types can cover the fighting types. So it's sort of a neat triangle that went around as well as a Fire, Water, Grass, Fairy, Dragon, Steel sort of thing. I like Hitmonlee. Again, it's a rapid spinner, extremely good high jump kick user. It's another priority user, gets Mach Punch, gets Fake Out. I mean, that's kind of most of the role that Hitmonlee fits into. I actually like Hitmonlee more on a terrain team, something to maybe replace. It's a budget Hawlucha in my mind. I think Hitmonlee is a really good budget Hawlucha, if that's how I'm going to describe it, which is a combo that you see quite often in Tapu Koko Hawlucha. I think Hitmonlee sort of fits that mold. Round 9, Jay ends up grabbing his Tier 5 in Volbeat, another Mon that I've seen him use previously. It's a Prankster Mon. You cannot pass boosts in this league, but it is a Prankster Tail Glow Mon, something a little bit more useful in other leagues. It offers Prankster Encore, which is kind of cool, prevents his team from getting set up on. I kind of like the idea of Volbeat. It's another pivot for his team. Excuse me. It's another pivot for his team. I don't like the pure bug typing on this team because he doesn't have the greatest fire resists. At the moment, it's Haxorus, which doesn't want to tank the hit, and it's Jellicent, while he has Bisharp and Volbeat that are both weak to fire at the moment, and Rotom-Mow that are weak to fire. So he'll be looking to patch that up a little bit later. And not much to talk about Volbeat. We're getting into the niche mons there. Unfortunately for me, the next two were not niche mons whatsoever. Jay ended up waiting until round 10 to pick his Mega and grabbed a Mega that was worth a ton of points for himself. He grabbed Mega Camerupt. Now, this Mega is going to fit super well on his Trick Room team. It is a really slow mon that works extremely well in Trick Room. It's a very good attacker. It's got decent bulk going for itself, and Sheer Force boosted Earth Powers and Fire Blasts are some of the scariest things ever. Mega Camerupt is pretty disgusting, honestly, on a Trick Room team, and I'm scared to see how this plays out. It's got a 4 times weakness to water, but he's got a water immunity and Jellicent to patch that up. He's got a Rotom-Mow to soak hits for that. I'm pretty scared of what's going to happen so far with this team. I think Mega Camerupt finishing off his Fire, Water, Grass core is actually pretty good, and I'll sort of talk a little bit more about that in the summary. Round 11, Jay ended up breaking his rule, cackled at us all and said, haha, you're all fools. I'm picking one Mon over base 100 so that my team doesn't lose every single time I can't get up Trick Room. And he grabbed Tornadus-Therian. Tornadus-Therian was drafted last season by Magic and the New York Meloettas. It did not do super well for Magic. It came to one game and it did nothing, I believe. It's a really fast Mon at base 121, sort of patches up his speed-ish. If he were not doing his little gimmick thing, then I would say Torn is a really good pick on this team. I'm actually kind of confused by what it's supposed to do. It's a defogger, which is kind of neat. Mega Camerupt is another Stealth Rock user on his team, which is kind of limited to Mega Camel, Clefable, and Bisharp. So I'm a little bit confused because I feel like Clefable is going to end up running rocks a lot, or Mega Camerupt is going to come just to set up rocks. It's another pivot for him, which I like. It's a really good pivot. I've seen him run Tornadus-Therian in the past. He's pretty decent with it. I'm just kind of a little bit confused by the pick, that's all. I think there were a few tier 1s that sort of made a little bit more sense to me at the time. I can't tell you what they are now because honestly I've forgotten, but we'll see how Tornadus works out for him this season. It's nice to have another ground immunity, not that it mattered that much because his team wasn't super weak to ground. Camerupt and Bisharp was only ground weaknesses, and he had Volbeat to soak ground hits and Rotom-Mow to be immune, and even when it's not immune, it takes him neutrally. Jellicent's a really good soaker. Clefable, Porygon are really good soakers, so um, maybe just for the pivot, who knows. So now we'll move on to his strengths and weaknesses of his team. He has 5 grass resist, which seems to be very common. Lots of people with 5 grass resist. He only has 1 grass weakness in Jellicent, so he's covered Jellicent pretty well at the moment. He's 5 fighting resist, which helps out Bisharp and his 4 times weakness to fighting extremely well. He actually has an immunity in Jellicent, and he has 4 other resists to fighting on this team. And he has 4 steel resist, which I think helps out the Clefable quite a bit. He's only got the 1 weakness to steel in Clefable, so having 4 steel resists helps him quite tremendously in my mind. In terms of major weaknesses, he has a pretty major weakness to fire. It's covered up by 3 resistances to fire as well, but I don't think his resist to fire are that fantastic. Something like a Mega Camerupt doesn't really want to take a fire attack all that much, to be completely honest. And Haxorus doesn't want to take it either. Neither of them have good recovery. It's probably, the burden there is probably going to be on Jellicent most of the time. He also has a significant weakness to ice. He has 3 ice weaknesses and only 1 resistance in Jellicent. I'm a little bit worried about this in particular because Haxorus is weak to ice, and that seems to be his main setup sweeper on this team, I would say. It's his best mon outside of Tornadus for functioning outside of Trick Room, in my opinion. And Rotom-Mow is a really good sponge for him, electric sponge for him, and Bolt Beam is some of the most common coverage in the entire game. So I'm a little bit scared about the ice weakness for him. That's why I sort of don't think that Tornadus is the way to go, but he's already picked Tornadus, so that's where we're at with that. I'll talk about his hazard game really quickly here. He has 3 Stealth Rock setters in Clefable, Bisharp, and Mega Camerupt. Again, I think either Mega Camerupt is going to have to come a lot to run rocks, or Clefable is going to have to run rocks quite a few times this season. I know Jay loves to play around hazards because it's a very basic aspect to the game that can lead to a lot of win cons being able to pick up wins for you. He does have removal options in Rotom-Mow with Defog, Hitmonlee with Rapid Spin, Volbeat with Defog, and Tornadus-Therian with Defog. Volbeat and Tornadus both being weak to rocks, but Tornadus having the regenerator ability means it can switch in on rocks, defog, and then switch out and still gain back health. I think Rotom-Mow is probably going to end up being quite the defogger this season. Hitmonlee on this team seems like it's going to have to put in a lot more offensive work and not really run Rapid Spin as often as he might like, and I don't see Volbeat coming to a ton of matches, but when it does, it most certainly will not be carrying defog, in my opinion. I think it's going to have too many other move slots that it's going to want to run, and defog will sort of fall to the wayside. So looking at his team, again, he was going with his gimmick of under base 100 mons. The Tornadus stands out as sort of a weird pick to me. I think Porygon 2 is going to succeed and put in a lot of work for him this season. I think Mega Camerupt is a huge threat on this team. Bisharp is a huge threat. Gothtail is something that I was not a fan of seeing drafted at all, but I think that it's going to be a problem for a lot of teams this season. Clefable is just annoying. Jellicent is just annoying. Volbeat's annoying. Hitmonlee is a threat. Haxorus is a threat. That's kind of all there is to it. I don't see a ton of synergy with this team. We'll sort of see how the weeks play out and see where the synergy is with this team. We'll sort of be able to see how Jay is using the team as well, and I'm excited to see how that goes. So Jay is a coach that will potentially be uploading this as I'm filming this. I know there was talks of him uploading. I'm not sure if he's completely committed to that or not. His channel link will be down in the description below anyways. He's also one of the featured channels on the NCL YouTube main page, along with quite a few of the other coaches, actually. My channel will also be in the description, and yeah, I'd like to thank you all for coming out and supporting the NCL content. It means a lot to us, and we hope that you continue to support the NCL as a league and support the NCL YouTube channel throughout the season. We have many more pieces of content coming out for you. There's unfortunately only one more draft recap video coming out after this, and that will be for Phil's team, who is alphabetically last on the list. Keep your eyes peeled for that. It should be coming out tomorrow, and I will catch you guys later. I hope you have a fantastic day.